where ROI really measures what you gain, ROM measures what you don't lose. So let's take organizations down a path on a journey about assessing where their most vulnerable data is, the path it takes, including is it being used by AI and large language models? Are we exposing ourselves to third-party agreements that we sign to keep that private? Let's shine a light on that, walk organizations through that.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by James Oliverio, the CEO and founder of a company called ideaBOX. At RevGenAI, we focus on how B2B leaders are generating real revenue in 2026 through AI, building thought leadership, and ultimately how they're actually generating pipeline with their go-to-market approach. Today, we're going to dive into how James is shaping ideaBOX, how they're really focused on their service and market fit, and what's actually working inside of cybersecurity, AI governance, and how he's actually creating trust, generating pipeline, and turning his expertise into real revenue. James, it's great to have you.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you so much for the invite, and I'm sure it'll be kind of a lively and vibrant conversation. But thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, can you just share a little bit about what ideaBOX does, like who you serve, and like what problem you guys are really focused on solving?
I mean, ideaBOX was something of an organization I've owned for many years, but I started my career several years, decades ago on Wall Street as a PC jockey with a PC card on a trading floor. As that investment bank grew, I grew with the bank and became the chief information officer. And then post that career, that bank was purchased. That bank was actually called Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette. It was purchased by Credit Suisse First Boston in the early 2000 timeframe. I took an opportunity to go with a bunch of investment bankers to another firm. After about a year, they said, go start a business because we're going to go out and start our firms. So a lot of those investment banking firms became my clients. I created what is known as a managed service provider, an IT company that manages other people's stuff. I sold that practice in 2015, took some time from the industry because of competitive reasons, enrolled myself in a program at Harvard University. It was called Mitigating Risk in the Information Age. Come join us. We're going to take apart all the major breaches of the time, the cyber breaches, Sony, Target, Equifax. So I said, well, this is interesting. So I spent 4 months in a think tank, and we pulled apart those breaches. And that's where ideaBOX I resurrected out of some of the concepts. So 3 things my big takeaway were. Separation of duties. I learned that you can't be the CIO and the CISO. I think today, when I fast forward that experience a few years ago, most firms follow that edict. So if you look at any major institution, they've separated that function. So there's no longer just going to the key person or group. The amount of data that was stolen from those organizations, the unstructured data, spreadsheets, Word documents, things people worked on, that was like, wow, that was the greatest vulnerability. And then lastly, fast forward, how do you explain all that gobbledygook tech jargon to the C-suite? Well, that's where I ran with this concept. It's called ROM, R-O-M, return on mitigation, where ROI really measures what you gain. ROM measures what you don't lose. So let's take organizations down a path on a journey about assessing where their most vulnerable data is, the path it takes, including is it being used by AI and large language models? Are we exposing ourselves to third-party agreements that we sign to keep that private? Let's shine a light on that, walk organizations through that, because they're spending boatloads of money thinking they're secure. We passed our last audit. But in reality, they fall into that pitfall of when a breach occurs, now they peel it back. We had that data. We had that much data. We had that kind of data. It's the homina. And by the way, in 2024, there was a study done, cyber risk policies, they only paid off on 44% of the claims. So a lot of firms think that they've got the financial risk covered when they go to use that policy, they're out of pocket. So we're solving for that equation. And so I work with financial services, medical, PE firms, private equity, managed service companies, where my old stomping ground, right? Separation of duties. You focus on ops, we'll focus on all the security stuff, right? Let us do this, get the assessment done. So we have these tools. I like to refer as tools, as instruments, as we conduct our symphony, right? So it's another instrument that we've detected that this brand here called ActiveFile is one of the tools that goes out and looks at that data traffic, or that data at rest, use, coming through, whether it's an Excel or download, show how the users are using that data. And what do you want to do with it? You want to protect it? And we can, with a click of a mouse, behind the scenes, no end user involvement, do file level encryption, hence improving their return on mitigation. That's who we are.
Amazing. I mean, I love that framework because, yeah, buyers only really care about the outcome. And when people are not really aware of the risk, what they might lose, having a clear framework where you're able to demonstrate what the actual return is of your service is key to any buying decision, right? So that's really sharp positioning, and I like that framework.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And instead of kind of like a return on investment, return on mitigation. So that's super interesting. And so from what I'm gathering is that the way you're approaching cybersecurity is kind of like the same way that you'd approach insurance or somewhat of a risk mitigator is essentially your service to businesses. And
yeah, I have a firm belief that you can't protect something unless you can assess it. So let's get a good. I always like to walk people down a path of, can you answer one fundamental question, which is, if there were data that's unstructured in your environment, well, A, do you know where it is, who has access to it? And if it got into the wrong hands, what would that liability or vulnerability look like? They mostly can't answer that. So I spent the last few years working with this company, ActiveFile, building out a tool that's an actual dashboard that shows dollars and cents. So for example, how do we get to those equations? We leverage a company, or it's not really a company, it's an organization called Fair Institute, where it looks at, breaches, the cost of breaches, the legal ramifications. When you look at a cybersecurity breach, if I'm not mistaken, it's operational, reputational, legal, and compliance issues. It all funnels down to the brand and do we lose a lot of money, right? So you pay a lot of fines and stuff like that. We use those algorithms. So we're able to basically rip through it and say a date of birth record's at $10, credit card's at 100, a medical procedure coupled with a date of birth with some other data is $120, right? We're able to come up with those calculations. But more importantly, we're showing records inside files near real time to say, Mr. Customer, Mr. Client, you're in the healthcare sector. You think the data is all up on your medical records database, but in reality, your end users pull these reports and they mine data in spreadsheets and documents, the very same documents that the NSA got breached. And a lot of stuff was taken, this Target, Equifax, Sony. These are the data, the unstructured data that the threat actors used against those organizations. Protecting, today it's the perimeter still, like the firewall, who's getting in. We assume someone's going to get in or accidentally take a file and email it to the wrong recipient. So I always like to tell this story, which is, the pivot. We took a client through the value prop, we put measures in place, we locked down files, and we get this urgent panic phone call from the secretary of the CEO, panicking. Oh my God, you got to help me. I just took all the executive compensation, the shares, because we're going public next week. And I emailed it to a bunch of recipients, and I noticed that the recipients on the list, I don't know where they came from, the dropdown, but they're not part of that group. And now they have a copy of the file. So I start chuckling. I go, Lucy, don't worry about it. I said, what do you mean? The file's protected. So the recipients that you sent it internally, because they have the tools we have in place, they can open it and see it. But anybody outside the organization, the file's encrypted. They can't read it. They're probably going to call you and say, you sent me something and I can't open the file. And that's what you're protected. So something as simple and innocent as that, we solve that. So that could have been something as simple, not a cyber breach, but an event that the company didn't want to know who's getting what shares at what prices and et cetera, right? And I always, these are like simple things, right? And it's not if, it's when, and when those events happen. I always like to, because I've been a data person my entire career. When I say data, when on Wall Street, we had to protect data that when the SEC came in on a legal hold, can we make sure that those files remain tamper-proof during the legal hold? And these emails, et cetera, right? We had to build systems to do that. So back then, it wasn't about cyber. It was about, well, you're being called into question, and this was communicated in emails. Did anybody manipulate or change the files and the formulas or any of the documents? We proved that those documents were valid, stamped, just like what we do today. Fast forward, it's about that data that now, because we're global and now AI enters the equation. I essentially, the blast radius is huge. That companies have to be asking themselves: our users are using Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot. Oh, they're putting data out there, but whose data is it? Is it yours? Is it your client data? What exposure does that look like? So I think they're all kind of scrambling, right? And I look from my perspective, let's just get assessment. Let's get our tools in place, our instruments, go out and tell you what those data flows look like so you can make some decisions.
Again, I think it's
not really, it's very easy to explain once I get to the C-suite. So I ask one question: do you know where the data is? Who has access to it? And if it got into the wrong hands, what would that look like? What would that pain look like? A $10 million bogey on the balance sheet? So it's all about the unfunded liabilities that live off your balance sheet of a company, right? So we're always constantly assessing. When I say some customers I have in our portfolio have hundreds of millions of risk in data that they were unaware how they manipulate. When I say hundreds of millions, one client, our tool detected a very series large of files and spreadsheets, eight copies of a file, 100,000 rows of patient data, date of birth, prognosis, location, what procedures were done, their Medicare information, Medicare codes, their payment terms, if they use credit cards. It was like 500,000 records. Well, of course, our tools lit up. We're able to point the client, say, hey, this is where the data is. What do you want to do with it? They discarded it. Said, we didn't realize our people were digesting this. Why do we need to assume they're the thing? And they were using this data to run analytics, databases, right? Many databases to run reports to say, hey, look, and I guess they were looking for medical fraud.
These are great examples. I think what I'm gathering from everything is that when you can get into a conversation, you know exactly the right questions to ask that are just like, oh my God, I didn't think about that, and that's a huge risk. So that's first of all, that's, I'm sure, years of experience of you seeing all the mistakes that could happen, and companies coming to you after the fact, right, and trying to fix that. But what I'm really interested in is because from everything that you're sharing with me, I hear that you know how to have that conversation when you're speaking to the, to the C-suite, and really help them understand the risk that they're really under. But when you're selling into, regulated industries, what is that first pain point or angle that you see has been working best to create the conversation proactively? Because obviously after a company experiences a data breach, then they're going to be shopping for vendors, and that's the small portion of the market that's always going to be available. But really, what have you seen helps you get in front of people who aren't actively shopping around looking for these types of services, haven't really come to understand the risk that they're under, And how do you get those people into conversations?
It's a multiple thread. I've had multiple outreach opportunities, obviously through podcasts as well, LinkedIn. We're going to be running some ads to kind of educate the market. We're just getting started on a concept around return on mitigation. Because it touches cybersecurity, it's a broad spectrum. The C-suite immediately wants to get the CIO and the tech people involved. And having been one of them for 30 plus years, that's not whom I want it, not to offend anyone. It's not who I really want to speak with at this point. I want firms to understand that, at the C-suite level, not that I've dumbed this down, but I've made it digestible enough that let's have a discussion about, what data do you think's there? Let's not talk about the tech. Let's not talk about the tools. Let's get that on the table. If you experienced a breach in the past, especially when it comes to regulation, there are a lot of different, whether it's NIST, high trust, some of the frameworks, we address with our process, a lot of the controls inside of those compliance metrics, right? For example, how you treat data and protections of data in cryptography, et cetera, will address those things. But we're not a silver bullet. It's not a single point solution. I think it's part of the stack that we're trying to get people to think about. And we're going to keep, carrying this message. ROM, right? Did you calculate your ROM? It's not a one-time thing. This is not a journey of beginning, middle, and an end. And if we get our wish list at ideaBOX, cybersecurity won't be treated as an expense. It'll be treated as a strategic instrument for the next generation for companies, right? Because they're all adopting AI. You've got to put a strategy around how you put governance and some guidelines around that. We think we have some of the instruments to do that, right? But we also, we'll try to stay away from the technical jargon that most tech people fall into. For example, when I work with managed service providers who have the ear of their client, they are the help desk, they run the infrastructure, they put out the applications that the client says that need to be done. They're afraid to have this conversation. But yet, as an MSP, if you're servicing 100 customers, think about it, and you've got 100 customers of data out there, do you want that risk to transfer onto your balance sheet as a business? You're working on people's stuff all day long, not understanding what the potential vulnerability is. And someday they're going to come knocking saying, you left the door open, you're liable. Maybe your E&O, errors and emissions insurance is not going to cover you. I know that business real well. I was in it for 14 years. Okay. What do you do? And now it's like, it's a scramble. Like they want to get a new firewall. I don't want to talk about the tech. What data is coming in and out? Let's keep it. We run sometimes our tools and instruments for several weeks, if not a few months, to say, okay, now that we see this, here's a rubric for you, right? And they go, what's that? Well, let's look at the top 10 users that touch your most sensitive data. Here they are. And we run through the list. True story, this happened. Number 2 on the list, $6 million of data risk. The colleague at the room goes, I don't understand why that person in our shipping department has $6 million of data risk. The shipping department. I said, you need to go investigate that. They come back. Apparently, when they added that new employee to Active Directory, they put him in the wrong group. That person had access to all the corporate records, and they were opening up all the payroll records, human resource records. They were surfing inside the company, reading all the documents. That's why they had such a high risk value, right? True story, right? The phone rings. Hi, this is the FBI. We think we found data on the dark web that belongs to your client. Your first reaction is, our client's been breached. They've been stealing data. And then when you dissect it and pull it back, you're able to see the files up on the dark web, match them to the files internally. But here's the difference. The ones internally are protected and encrypted. But there's a log around that. Further down the list, someone had the right click option to decrypt the file and send it to a third party. We looked at all the files that went to that third party, or the files are up on the dark web. So guess what? Who was responsible for that? The third party. So we were able to shift the burden of responsibility. I'm talking about hundreds of spreadsheets, PDF documents, because we have these tools tracking that and we had protections around it. Legally, we shifted the burden in that case. So, I've got lots of stories the last 2.5, 3 years on this journey. But again, I'll get back to the main point. Don't put another technology stack out there without giving this a go. Let's assess it. And MSPs, managed service providers, since they own the client and the desktop, because we do have to put an agent on a workstation or server and an agent up on the cloud. So there's a bit of install software. It takes a few minutes and then let it do its thing, right? Since they have that audience, let's run it. And when I've done this successfully, within a matter of days, we see the risk. A matter of weeks, the client says, we have this type of data. Apparently so. What do you want to do with it? Do we need it? It's your business. Well, what can we do next? Let's activate protection. And they pay. It's it. I can't say it more simply than that. And I've had over 1,000 conversations like this in the last 18 months with customers exactly like that. Didn't know who we were. And I work, hand in hand with this technology, Actifile, and other types of technologies that offer similar capability about data detection, but it's the same subject. Let's build out your rubric. Let's assess what your return on mitigation would look like, your ROM. Assess what that data flow looks like. Are you 100? Are you 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, 200 million, right? I've seen wild data flows from 10 million to 1 billion, and it's because of the data coming in and out. Let's see what that looks like. And then we assess and decide what are the tech stack that you need to deploy and get a good sense of who's using your data.
I love that. I think I've interviewed a lot of cybersecurity professionals on the podcast, and I think that the narrative and the way that you're communicating, how you're positioning the services is really sharp. It's really just it's really coherent and simple to understand, which is why I like that you're positioning more for the C-suite as opposed for the technical people, because ultimately that's who decides at the end of the day. Curious, just if you could really think about it, like what do you feel is the number one bottleneck on client acquisition and growth?
I think it's really just it falls. I guess it falls underneath the category of education and marketing, right? I think the C-suite's still in a pattern. I talked to from my perspective, it's called the boardroom shift. Most companies are in boardroom number 1, which is that's our IT. They've got it undercovered. We passed our last audit. We have a cyber risk policy in place that they think's covering them. We got our last audit. They really haven't experienced a serious event yet, right? And boardroom 2 shift conversation is we assessed with our new tools, we've identified $10 million of data risk. We decided that we would reduce that by 82% by doing X, Y, and Z. We confirmed with our cyber risk policy that we're within the limits. We haven't experienced event, and we did our last tabletop exercise a few weeks ago, and we feel confident that if an event occurred, we've assessed our return on mitigation. We know what data we're dealing with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's kind of obvious which boardroom you want to be in, right? Because the one boardroom number 1, I feel it's a little bit uncertain. It's typical when you look up on the web and some company says we've been breached. It's not if, it's when, whether it's a breach or an event, right? Data's stolen, right? Whether in healthcare or other. A lot of events occur. A lot of companies don't report themselves, right? They'll pay the ransom, which is just enriching threat actors, right? The extortionists, just to get their data back. And it happens every day. It's very lucrative. So it's marketing. I think it's educating the market that there's a way to do this. It's not terribly expensive to do it. Within a matter of days, if not weeks, you'll get some kind of comfort level where you're at. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Whatever security structure you have in place, I think we just enhance it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that we're still early in the AI adoption curve, and people are still kind of figuring out. Some companies are holding back. Some people are going, and some companies are going way deep into it without really understanding the risks. And I think companies like yours are positioned perfectly to be the bridge between how fast the development and industries are going to change, and where risk really needs to be mitigated. Just to wrap things up here, James, if you were to sit across from somebody just starting out their career, especially in our day and age, what advice would you give them that would help them make the most progress towards a successful business and career?
Look, AI has arrived, right? So I think you have to carve out if you're getting in the industry, whether it be on tech or not. I don't care what role you're in. AI is replacing. They talk about replacing a lot of job functions. It's accelerating that. Yes, I think those who adopt and figure out how they can leverage them, and for their role and responsibility, those will be the victors. Okay. But, nobody has a crystal ball. There's been a lot of layoffs. So if I'd say embrace it, look at the tools that are out there, stay up to snuff on it. There's a lot of free stuff out there to learn, whether it be Claude, OpenClaw, Manus, Perplexity. There's a lot of different LLM tools, but frankly, I've been using the last several months that they're very, very helpful. They are good tools to kind of bounce off some ideas locally, if you will. There's some hallucinations with it, and it's showing some terrific promise. So I would definitely, today, if you're in the tech sector, you can't ignore it. You can't. I think they're priced right. Some of these services are a couple $100 for the year. But you can blow through usage and tokens as you will. But engross and learn. There's a lot of social media people out there pumping what you could do with those tools. I think you have to embrace it, and how you're going to frame it and use it.
100%. I think it's too hard to ignore nowadays, and you're completely right that in the intermediate future, I don't think AI is going to replace us just yet. I think those that are really leveraging it and know how to use the tools to achieve real business outcomes, be it return on investment or return on mitigation, like you're focused on, I think it's massively high leverage. So yeah, I agree completely. And I really appreciate everything you brought to the conversation today, James. For anyone who wants to reach out, where's the best place for them to find you?
www.ideabox.com, ideabox.com, and just send me an email at james@ideabox.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.